we all agree that politics must be better than this, that our country is better than this, our country deserves better than this. And the way we get there, partly, is to reform politics. And a big part of that has to be to reform the voting system.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. I'm back in the hosting chair after Hannah did the Big Leaders special. If you haven't seen that, please go see it. We have interviews with basically Mark Pack, Ed Davey and Mike Dixon, all giving their run through of 2021 and also what we can expect in 2022. But as part of the future, we have, of course, the wonderful Lisa Smart, who is our target candidate in the Hazel Grove constituency. Hello, Lisa.
Hiya, John. Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, you are not only a friend of the podcast, but you're part of the podcast family. So this is slightly awkward because I have to pretend I don't know some of this stuff. But we will go through this step by step. And first of all, we should also thank everyone who listens to the podcast. And if you have any questions, any comments regarding anything you hear in this episode, do let us know in the comment section, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you listen to this podcast. So first of all, Lisa, I suppose we should start right at the very basics, really. So let's describe where Hazel Grove is.
Hazel Grove is the finest part of Stockport, which is the finest borough of the 10 in Greater Manchester. So we're just on the southeast of Greater Manchester and we border up to the Peak District. So I can drive 10 minutes from my house and I can go walking in absolutely beautiful parts of the countryside, or I can get a train into town, into Manchester city centre in about 20 minutes. So we are a brilliant part of the world and it's a great place to live.
Now, obviously, I am not getting into that Vietnam War-esque kind of comment about the best part of Greater Manchester because we've got to do the interview with Tom in Cheadle at some point. So, but you're all part of Stockport and you're all part of the wider Stockport area. And so for listeners that don't know, there are 3 and a bit constituencies that make up Stockport Council, of which we are incredibly competitive. We are the largest group, are we now? But Labour are still in control with the help of the Tories, which they don't like to advertise about. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. We're the largest party, Labour next. They hold the administration because the Tories voted to keep them in. We've got a small independent group and 1 Green councillor. So it's very, very balanced council in Stockport.
So to give viewers a bit of a mixture, when you do go canvassing in Stockport, which anyone in and around the Northwest should absolutely be thinking, when can I come and help Lisa? When can I come and help Tom in Cheadle and Hazel Grove? Is that you have quite a dichotomy of different things going on. When I do canvassing there, so you might be Labour facing in terms of the council, but then Tory facing in terms of the MPs. And it does make things very interesting. And you've got to know your onions when you're out doing that. But we will come to all the machinations of who you're fighting, how you're going to fight them, and how you are going to become the next MP for Hazel Grove. But let's go even further, more basic. Who is Lisa Smart?
Oh, that's a big question, John. So I have recently been reselected as the candidate for Hazel Grove, Lib Dem candidate for Hazel Grove, which is a brilliant job in itself. I love it, being the candidate. I love being part of a team. I love, on some occasions, leading that team. And it's a job I've done since 2013 when I was first selected to fight the 2015 general elections. I've been the candidate, this will be the 4th time. So I've done 15, 17, 19 and whenever the next general election is. And so you can see, for those people looking on YouTube, you can see the lines around my eyes that weren't there in 2013 when I was first selected. But no, it's a great job. It's a great team. And the reason it's a great job is because you can get stuff done. And so some of the stuff we've got done has been national. So proposing motions at conference, changing party policy, which for Lib Dem listeners is probably more of interest in the rest of the world. And I think for what's of relevance for people who live locally are things like saving the Rosehill rail line, getting asset of community value status for Tanshire Field, different things like that, which you can do as a campaigner locally, as a Lib Dem locally. More recently, as a councillor, so I was elected as a councillor in 2016. So I'm in my 6th year as a councillor now. So that's what I do, John, as a Lib Dem. I do other stuff as well, I guess, but that.
Yeah, and that's what we really want to get into now, because we want to know Lisa Smart, the person. Okay, so you were not born in Stockport. Where were you born, Lisa?
I was born in Lytham St Anne's in Lancashire. So Ed, my partner, was born in Stockport, and that's why we live here.
And so was politics always some part of your life for early age? Was that something you thought, right, you know what, I'm like one of these young liberals that comes and does all this wonderful work for us, you think, right, this is me forever now?
No, absolutely not. So my mum and dad, I was brought up by my mum and dad, and I have one younger brother, James. And mum and dad always voted and always really got into us that voting was really, really important, but they weren't politically active. So I remember my first two political memories. One's being at primary school and some of the lads had learnt the chant, Maggie, 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 out, 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 which kind of dates it, right? And then the other
outrageous.
in St Anne's. I was born in lived in St Anne's. And the second one is of my dad talking to my dad about who he was voting for in the election, because I think it had been on News Round or something like that. And he said he was voting for the Lib Dems because of the penny in the pound on income tax. And so that's the first time I'd got my head around people vote for different reasons. And my dad was voting because James and I were both at school. So that was an important policy for him, and he was voting Lib Dem. So mum and dad always voted, really important to vote. Whenever we had school elections and things like that, they used to encourage us to do that. But nobody in my family was ever remotely politically active, other than being really, really conscientious voters. The first time I ever thought about doing anything really political, like party political, was I'd kind of got in my late 20s, I guess. So I'd done things that were, if you think about it, political much earlier than that. So I'd done public speaking competitions at school where I'd argued for things I believed in, and on one occasion things I didn't believe in.
What was that? What was the thing you did? What was the thing you didn't believe in? You had to argue for.
So I was at secondary school, and our wonderful English teacher, Miss Bouget, was the led on debating and on public speaking. And she said, "Well, what do you care about?" And it was in the news at the time about the legalization of marijuana. And I wrote a speech, which I was dead proud of. And she said, "Oh, I'll just give it a bit of an edit." And I'd said, "Of course it should be legalized. This is just daft. What on earth are we doing?" And she completely reversed the position. So she took some of the stats I'd got and flipped them on their head and said, "Of course it shouldn't be legalized or decriminalized. That's absolutely the wrong thing. It sets a bad example. One crime leads to another. It's a gateway drug, all this stuff." And at the time I was probably 14. So I took her advice. She'd had a really strong track record of getting good teams to win in the public speaking competition. And she persuaded me by saying, "Lisa, these are a really conservative group of people, conservative with a small c, although I suspect there was an overlap with large c conservative." So it was the Business and Professional Women's Public Speaking Competition or something like that. When I was the main speaker of our team, delivered the speech, won the best, we went through to the next round, and I won best main speaker in the Northwest for this speech, which was not what I believed at all. And I remember winning and thinking, yeah, that was really good. But imagine what I would have felt like had I been talking about something I actually believed in, rather than arguing the exact opposite of what I thought about. And that was a really useful experience for me in thinking through what matters and how to feel good about what you're doing and how you motivate yourself to do things you believe in, and how it's just way easier when you're talking about stuff you actually believe in. I found the speech about, I don't know, 20 years later, 30 years later, probably. No, 20 years later. So I've been about 35. And the first line of it was something like, at the most recent conference of the Liberal Democrats, they decided, and this is many years before I joined the party and before I even thought about doing anything political. So I had done small p political things. I've been a school governor.
But not party political.
But not party political, no.
So when did that change? So when did you think, because obviously not many people get, well, I don't know, Lib Dems out there. Have you been in debating societies? My Common Garden Comprehensive had no debating society. That would seem completely alien to me. But you obviously had political instincts, shall we say? When did they suddenly become party political kind of to the fore?
So it was a Catholic comp, just to clarify. I went to a Catholic St. Darcy High School in Lytham. And then on to Cardinal Newman Sixth Form in Preston, John.
Yeah, very good.
where the councillor for Cadley is something of a well-known person, as I understand it. People there.
Previous one on me.
So when did I think that party politics would be for me? So I used to take a real interest in, current affairs and politics and issues that were going on. And I'd do the stuff that you do, I'd watch Question Time and I'd listen to any questions and find it really interesting. But interesting, yes, in the politics of it and almost the showmanship of something like Question Time was really interesting. But it was particularly the how do you get stuff done? So how does the world work? I think if you want this doesn't work, I want to change it. How do I do that? So I've been a school governor since I was about 23. And I was like, this bit isn't working at the moment. How do we get to change that? And it was working out, well, you work with the council in this way, you work with national government in that way. So that I was really interested. And I used to really, really get quite worked up about what they were talking about. And I used to shout at the television like somebody who was not doing great with their life. I used to shout like a crazy person.
A mad person. You want to say like a mad person.
Like a mad person. And I used to shout at the Lib Dems, but probably slightly less than I shouted at everybody else.
Has that flipped now? Do you shout at Lib Dems more now?
So I went on, I was watching Question Time one night and I was shouting particularly wildly. And I remember thinking, this is not good for me, this, and it's really not good for my neighbours because I was living in a flat at the time. I was thinking, they must just be thinking, who are they living next to? I thought, I've got to do something about it. And I'd always voted Lib Dem, but never really thought loads about what next. So I thought, right, I'm gonna join. So I went online and thought, before I join and give these people my credit card details, I better just check that actually they're my team. I agree with them. And I stumbled across the preamble to the Constitution, which is where all the cool kids hang out on the LibDem website. And the more I read, the more this is it. This is how you make the world a better place. This is absolutely what I believe in. This is my team. These are my people. Sign me up. And so I did. And
what year was that, roughly?
2009.
2009.
So 13 years ago now, I joined when I was living in Putney. So I was in my 20s and living in London and working. I was working in, I was client relations manager for pension funds and charities and foundations at the time. So I was working in asset management. So I was earning quite a good wage, single. It was a great time to be living in London then. It was brilliant. I was having a great time. But I joined a local party, which was Putney, which at the time wasn't the most active local party. So lovely people, but not the most active. And I had to try quite hard to get involved locally. It was not the easiest thing to do. But luckily, London region, or different parties in London, had different things going on. And so I went along, I met people. I went to conference. I can't remember which the first conference was that I went to, but I remember going to the first timers reception and just meeting people who I still am in touch with, say hi to, and just kind of throwing myself into it and feeling quite quickly that I'd found my team and that this was a group of people who cared about the same stuff I cared about and thought about things in a way that had got them to the same answers to the questions they'd been asking themselves. And I just sat in loads of training. Because I think I sat in a couple of I'm just thinking about that first conference, sat in a couple of auditorium debates and thought, well, this is all very interesting, but I want to get stuff done. So went back and just sat through the training and worked out how am I going to get more stuff done. And that has continued with me on my journey as a Liberal Democrat, much more in the training than in the auditorium.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Prater Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their LibDem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Prater Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, LibDem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Prater Rains website at praterrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats.
Hazel Grove switched from Tory to Lib Dem in 1997 when Lord Stunnell won the seat. So
yes, but you need to go earlier than that, though, John.
Do I?
Actually,
have I got my research wrong?
No. So you're absolutely right. But historically, the boundaries were different, and there was Lib Dem or Liberal presence much earlier. So Michael Wynne Stanley was the MP
1974.
twice. And the reason why I mention that is because he still comes up on some doorsteps. He was the MP, I think, twice in 66 and 74, one of the 74 elections, wasn't it?
Yeah. 74. Yeah, that's right.
And he was well known and well liked and still comes up on the doorstep. So there was that history there and then, sorry for interrupting you, but you were absolutely right. Andrew won the second time of standing. So Andrew stood and narrowly lost in 92. And then
204 votes he lost by.
Had an absolutely storming victory in 1997.
Yeah, and then got nearly a 12,000 majority win in 1997. So Hazel Grove had been basically throughout the New Labour era, had been Lib Dem. When did you arrive in the constituency? When did you start getting active in Hazel Grove?
So I moved. So Ed's always lived here, pretty much. Ed's my partner. Ed was first canvassing, I think, in the womb, I think is the story as it goes, or certainly in his pram. So Ed's history here is significantly longer than mine. So I moved here in 2012, and I've lived in Romley ever since. So this is my second home in Romley, where you can see, people who are looking on YouTube can see my dining room. And was an active Lib Dem already, so threw myself into it from then.
So arriving in 2012, and for those of us who were councillors and campaigners in that time, it was a rough time during coalition. You know, a lot of us were scrapping just to survive. You arrive and then think, at which point, I don't know when Andrew knew he was going to step down, but at that point you thought, there's going to be an election at some point. In the end, it was 2015. And what made you decide, right, this is me. I want to do this?
So Andrew announced he was retiring in 2013. And so there was a selection, there was a competitive selection, 5 people on the shortlist, and I won on the first round. And
what percentage? I bet you know.
I do, but I won on the first round, John.
Okay, that's okay. Humble.
So Andrew announced at an exec meeting. So I think I was membership development secretary at that point. And Andrew announced at an exec meeting that he was going to retire at the next general election because he would have done 18 years and he was going to be 72, 73, something like that. And so there would be a selection. So the local party put in train the selection process. I was an approved candidate because I'd stood the previous election in London as one of the constituency candidates. So you needed to be an approved parliamentary candidate. So I'd done all that. And I'd enjoyed it because I think there were some people, I was really keen actually to try being a candidate because I thought I quite like the look of it, but you don't know till you do it. And I'm really glad I did. And you learn loads through standing. And I learned that I really enjoy it, actually, and I'm quite good at some parts of it. So it was a good thing to have done. And so I have been the candidate here since 2013.
What is it you enjoy about being a candidate?
I really, really like getting stuff done. And I really, really like being part of a team. And I think there are a few things that are as team-driven as party politics. And there is nothing like winning when you're a scrappy bunch of insurgents who have no real right to expect a win or a good result or anything like that. That can be addictive as well. That's the other thing that I think people who haven't campaigned before don't expect is how much fun you can have and how brilliant it is. So a couple of examples, actually, how brilliant it is, yes, as a team and to win, but also to get stuff done. So a couple of examples of some of the campaigns we've run locally that have made change happen, that have got stuff done. So there's one that it affects 4 households, right, in my patch. And Openreach were putting in broadband and had missed out this little cluster of housing in a rural part of my patch. And it didn't make sense. And these residents had written and had said, this doesn't make, why are you doing this bit near to us and then the bit the other side of us, but missing us out? And had just got an unsatisfactory response, maybe let's call it that. And then they asked for help, or they said, where can we go to help? I said, well, I'll, write a Strocky councillor letter. And it needed quite a bit of follow-up. So I wrote to the chief exec of Openreach. I did a number of other things that resulted in broadband now being provided by Openreach to these 4 properties in my patch. So that small thing affects those people massively. So when you've got kids who are doing homeschooling, when you've got people who are really quite senior at local hospitals who are needing that decent broadband service, that actually has a much wider impact. So that's one example of a small thing that made a really, really big difference. Other stuff that we've done that's had a much wider or much more obviously wider impact is things like saving the Rosehill rail line. So this is a rail line that comes right throughout the constituency, or through four of the 6 current wards. And during COVID, it's Northern Rail, so Northern Trains Limited, so state owned at the moment. And they just said, well, we're going to stop this service, which, I mean, you'll know as a councillor, it's much easier to campaign to save something than to get something back. Because if they go, oh, well, we've noticed people can live without it and they've changed their behaviour. And it was so important to keep it because we need people's behaviour to change. So without going on a climate change rant, we need people to know they can get the train so that they don't buy a car. And if you then undo all that behaviour change work you've done, it's a massive deal. Putting to one side, kids getting to school, from school, all of that. So we ran a proper campaign. So if you open the Lib Dem, this is how you run a campaign book, of which there are many, we did loads of the stuff on that list to save the Rosehill rail line. And because of the relationship with government and because we shamed them into it, the Rosehill rail line still runs. It does not have the service it should have. It should have a much better service, John. But it still runs because we did all of the right stuff. We had a massive petition, huge, over 5,000 people. We had, it was one of the biggest petitions that we've ever run. And it really matters because if we don't have proper infrastructure, we don't have proper public transport, then we're never going to be able to make those changes that we as a society need to make. And I'm going to stop ranting about trains now, because I know this is a Lib Dem podcast, but there's a limit to how much.
No, but you've probably upped our listenership by talking about trains considerably for this episode. Knowing Lib Dems as we do.
If I start talking about rolling stock, then it'll just
yeah, absolutely. But obviously, one of the things I want to get across is so you've stood and not been successful. Mm-hmm. So how you pick yourself back up, and knowing you as I do, I think from my point of view, I see you as someone who knows that if you were to get elected as an MP, the phenomenal work you could do for your area if you got there. And I think that is part of the many fights we have to get. And you might think, oh, well, Lib Dems are never going to get 200 MPs or 300 MPs or whatever. But actually, every single brick of liberalism we put into Britain is a good thing. And for you to be elected in Hazel Grove would be a fantastic thing.
Oh, thanks, John. So I think I'll start on the motivation first and then talk about kind of locally and then nationally, I guess. So motivation, I have won elections and lost elections and strongly agree that winning elections is better on balance than losing elections. Losing elections is rubbish and it's different when you're the candidate. And I think there are a lot of people who campaign tirelessly as activists, campaign managers, agents, and it isn't the same when you're the candidate, when it's your name on the ballot and when people have actively chosen to vote for somebody else rather than you. That is a different feeling and it's rubbish. And you need a few, I don't know, hours, days, weeks, months, whatever, to work it through and to process it. And I think, and you're knackered as well, because it comes at the end of a period of your life where you've worked really hard, and it's hard. It's hard being a candidate in a general election, and it should be hard, right? It's a privilege to represent the party like that, and it's a privilege to be on a ballot paper and ask people for their support. But you need a bit of time to get over losing. And the way I have decided to stand again now 3 times is going, why was I doing it to begin with? You know, have the things changed that made me think, well, I'll stand and put myself up to represent our area, put myself up to represent our party? And they haven't. And if anything, actually, they've kind of got more urgent and more important. And the need for, as you say, further bricks of liberalism in that blue wall, or more liberalism in our country, are clearer now, I think, than they have been for a while. So I joined the party and got active in the party before Brexit and before, you know, Priti Patel was Home Secretary or Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. And the winding back of some of those things, the winding back of some of the progress we've made in terms of how we talk about other people and how we talk to other people and the sort of country we want to be. I believed when I first joined, and I believe even more strongly now, that for every Liberal Democrat we get elected, whether it's a parish and town council, whether it was to the European Parliament when we were members, or now as MPs, can make that massive difference and push forwards the things we know as Liberal Democrats need to be pushed forward. So, yeah, it's tough when you lose, but it really matters that we stand, and it matters that we win more often than we do. On the why I want to do it locally, so you're absolutely right. When I first moved here, Andrew was the MP, and I saw the level of service people here got, and I saw the response they got to their letters and their emails, and just the amount he gave a crap. And the people who live here now don't get that. And they deserve much better than they're currently getting.
Now, well, let's let listeners and viewers know what the election result was in 2019. So your Conservative MP is William Bragg. He got just shy of 49% of the vote. You got just shy of 39% of the vote. Labour got 12% of the vote, and were falling were Labour. Now, you are too classy a person to say this, Lisa, so I'm going to. So for those that don't know William Bragg, he is very strong Brexiteer, very lockdown skeptic, and a bit of an idiot. So I'm allowed to say that. Lisa won't, because I know she's too finely tuned to get into the mud like I will. But when you look at the difference of what a Lisa Smart MP would be compared to a William Bragg, I know which one I think will do better for Hazel Grove. And even if you won't say it, Lisa, I think every Lib Dem listening will think that as well. And so the challenge now is to make that happen. And we are now in 2022. Potentially the election is next year, as frightening as that sounds. It will, I think, probably after boundary changes happen. So what for you is the biggest challenge in your role right now?
You're right, John. All we need is a 5% swing. And
So I should say the majority. Sorry, I didn't actually say that to listeners. So the majority that William Bragg has is 4,423.
Yeah, that's right. And so in order to win next time, we need to persuade some of those people who voted Labour last time to support us, and also some of those people who voted Conservative for whatever reason, that actually we do a better job for them locally and nationally. So we need to look at both of those groups of people, because people vote for all sorts of reasons, and we need to give them loads of really good, positive reasons why they want a Lib Dem MP rather than the current Conservative. So the biggest challenge, I think, at the moment, so we're doing this on the first day back in work after the Christmas and New Year period. Some of the team having been out with COVID has been a recent challenge, but hopefully everybody is now testing sufficiently negative so that they can come into work and do their stuff. I think for us, We've done some work on our messaging, so thinking about how we talk to those people and how we listen to those different groups of people that I was talking about, and how we persuade them on the things that they care about, on the things that are going to drive their vote, that we are the answer to the question that they're asking themselves. So that for us has been a challenge in previous years. I think we've made some progress on that, and we'll continue to fine tune and test that and so on. I think for us as Liberal Democrats, it's the ground game is so much more important for us than it is for any other party. We've got a brilliant local team, like on a genuinely great group of people. And I think getting back up and at them properly post-COVID. So when you're a group of people that's used to coming together in person, often to have fun and to campaign and to get stuff done, when you can't do that, that's quite hard. And so we've been able to do some of that. You know, we're recording this in January, where people are taking good and sensible decisions about what they do in person and what they don't. Some of that, just the logistics of some of that is quite tricky. The other thing is money, of course. We don't have the backers that the Conservative Party have. So we at a local level, and all local parties who have got target seats, need to do lots of full-on fundraising work that the Tories just have to do, because they get big business backers who coincidentally may end up with seats in the House of Lords. Entirely coincidentally, there's absolutely no relationship between those things at all, John. But we need to do work at more at a local level to do some fundraising to make sure we can afford all the stuff we need to do, afford the campaign we need to run, so that we can fight people on an even footing.
And you guys in Stockport have in Hazel Grove, both sides of Stockport, but in Hazel Grove in particular, you have an office ready to go, you have staff. So if people are thinking, well, it's not the general election yet, there's always something to fight for. Not only have you got really important local elections in this May, but actually it's a bit like almost when you come to a target seat, because you're my nearest target seat pretty much. And when you come to a target seat and see there's always stuff ready to go, there's always leaflets, there's always something to be done. So if you can get out campaigning, do go to the office. So I'll link through to it, as well as all the websites in the show notes. But also, like Lisa said, donations are really key. These offices have to have staff, have equipment, have resources like leaflets that need to be produced. So do get involved, if either financially or if you can do in person.
Yeah, thanks, John, for that nice pitch. If somebody did want to turn up, give us a ring. The office number is 0161 406 7070. And just as an example of stuff John's been talking about, the way you don't win an election in the short campaign, you lose it. As Liberal Democrats, you need to do the work all year round in places like Hazel Grove. Otherwise, if you're waiting till the short campaign, you've left it a bit late. So we had a leaflet I was really pleased with, actually, a lovely A3 full colour, went out between Christmas and New Year. So across the constituency, it's a really nice piece of work that I'm dead chuffed that the team put together. And we need to pay for that. And because we did it between Christmas and New Year, we did paid delivery, because as much as our activists love doing the leaflets in December, we figured, we'd give them a week off. So it was Royal Mail delivered, and we need to pay for that. So any help, super welcome.
So you talked about your volunteers and deliverers having, week off. How do you balance life and work, politics and everything? How do you get that balance right? Obviously, you are part of a political couple. Ed, your partner, works for the ALDC, so politics is pretty much everywhere, I imagine. But you need to also get that right as well. We can't always all be on it, otherwise our heads would explode. So how do you get that balance right?
So I'm just looking in my dining room. For people who are watching on YouTube, you can see our wine rack behind me. And if you saw me before Christmas, that had a lot more wine on it than it has now. So I was going to say I just drink heavily, John, which is how I get through. No, genuinely enjoy wine, though. Ed did some wine exams in the first and second lockdown. And so has learned a lot. And so is now, I'm very happy to support him with this hobby of his. But I'm much more able to articulate which wines I like. And I think traveling to the vineyards sometimes. So I love travel. I love holidays. I love experiencing different food and people and wine and culture and all of that stuff. That's how I really relax and really switch off properly. And I think I've demonstrated over Christmas, trying to have a holiday at home is hard when you're the local councillor, because you go and walk with the dog, which is also very good for my well-being and mental health. But you go and walk the dog and somebody talks to you about their bin collection when you're halfway around your dog walking loop. And that's great that they know who I am and can come and talk to me, but it's perhaps not the most restful way for me to start my day. So for me, traveling outside the area and going to see different places is the best way for me to reset and really switch off for a while. Other stuff I do, so I quite like, I know for myself, I need to exercise properly. I know I can tell if I don't. So if I haven't been to my Pilates class, my lower back lets me know. But just making sure I go for a swim or go for a proper walk with the dog and see friends and family are the key things I do.
Lovely. And so we're just coming near the end of the interview now, but I want to kind of give an impression. We had a very brief overview of Hazel Grove. What's the best things about this constituency?
I think it is. So it's a beautiful part of the world. And if you like walking, there are so many places to walk. We've got beautiful canals that are rich with the area's industrial history. And I'm quite sure they should be celebrated more than they are, and actually cared for a bit more than they are in some places. And so lots of people come from far and wide to go and walk in the Peak District. Lots of people go into the centre of town, and we're somewhere between the two. So I think being able to have nature on your doorstep, but also go and be able to get a really nice cup of coffee and meet up with friends somewhere with a bit of buzz. I think we're uniquely placed here to be within touching distance of a real range of options. So if you like buzz and you like city centre life, you can be close enough, you can be in within 20 minutes. If you like a lovely walk, a bit of peace and quiet, some of nature, it's on your doorstep. And I think the community here has a sense of, there's a real community spirit, which you don't get everywhere. And it's different in different parts of the constituency, but there is a real sense of community that you just don't get in all parts of the country.
Oh, right. So I've got several questions to finish off that I've asked all the candidates, whether they've been based in London or all the way up here in Hazel Grove. So if you had 10 times the budget you have now, what would you spend it on?
Leaflets.
More and more leaflets.
No, I think we spend it on. So one of the things I do for the party, as well as being the candidate, is I chair the Federal Communications and Elections Committee, and which is the party's main campaigns committee, and we look at what works and what doesn't work. And leaflets work, and particularly direct mail works. And I think if I could just stamp that on a piece of paper and send it to every local party, and have them believe me, then I'd be a really happy person, because all of the evidence is that this works, and it's repeating the message as well. It's not just one leaflet. So we do leaflets here. We do lovely leaflets here. If we had an unlimited budget, we'd probably pay for somebody else to deliver some of them, so we'd be able to do more. Yeah, so that's one. And you can when you're doing paid delivery, you can target it differently as well. I think we have a strong staff team here because we've done the fundraising. We've got a shopfront office on the main road in Romilly. So we've got that. So my additional thing would be to do more lovely leaflets. Lovely. But I'm sure if you gave me 10 minutes notice on that question, John, I could have come up with something else, but we'll stick with more lovely leaflets.
I like the instant, this is what I feel. And you're absolutely right about leaflets. So many Lib Dems complain about them. And we had Lib Dems complain about it in the North Shropshire by-election, and look at what happened there. So, there's evidence out there, guys. I know it can be frustrating, but actually just enjoy the exercise and deliver the leaflets. So what's the one question you wish I had asked that I haven't?
There's always a really good hustings question whenever you have an internal hustings, and which are the worst because you're fighting against like your mates anyway. And it's which minute areas of Lib Dem policy do you disagree on most is often one that you end up on internal elections. But external elections as well. If you had a private member's bill So if you come out on the private members bill draw and you're up high, and so you propose a piece of legislation, what would it be? So I think that's always quite a good one.
Okay, so you can click your fingers, make a law tomorrow. What would it be?
Proportional representation. Just in case you were doubting that I was a Liberal Democrat, John.
Oh, yeah, you've mentioned trains and PR. God, all you're going to do is mention the Constitution. In fact, you have mentioned the Constitution.
Federalism, John. No.
Yeah.
So the reason why it would be PR is because I think if you fix that, so much else slots into place. If you make politics work better and fairer, so many of the problems that we currently have just don't exist. And so that is why if I had a private members bill, it would be PR.
Would that be a red line for you? If you were an MP in Parliament at the next after the next general election, there are all sorts of talks going on in a hung Parliament. Would that be a red line for you?
It has to be, I think, for Liberal Democrats. I think because we don't get the opportunity very often to form part of an administration or to have a strong say, whether it's an administration or some other arrangement, to have a strong say. And it is something that we, as a party, agree on in a way that there's a range of views on a number of topics within the party. On the need for electoral reform, there isn't really that. We all agree that politics must be better than this, that our country is better than this, our country deserves better than this. And the way we get there, partly, is to reform politics. And a big part of that has to be to reform the voting system. And I think that there are other parties who already agree with us on that. And I think there are parts of the Labour Party who agree with us, not a big enough part yet, but they have been, the Conservatives disagree, right? But the hope is
without them. Yeah,
that enough Labour people agree with us so that something could change after the next election.
Because like you said, you change that, all politics changes afterwards.
It has to, because of the way politics is conducted at the moment. And there's loads of work about polarisation around, if you create an us, we all agree with one another over here, then you create a them. And there's some really interesting literature out there around polarisation. And one of the things that a better voting system does is to decrease the benefits of that polarisation. So it's not, vote for all those Lib Dems who hate bar charts. What you want is more PR, because you don't need a bar. If it's not us or them anymore. That isn't how it works.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on and spending an hour on the podcast. You'll be back on again within a few episodes. Anyway, like I said, you're part of the podcast family. But for everyone who's listening or watching, where can they find you, Lisa? Where can they be in touch? Where can they donate? Where can you send them?
lisasmart.org.uk is the best place to go, where you can donate, sign up to volunteer, find our contact details, and we'd love to have you.
There you go. And also, Lisa is on Twitter as well. I will link that in the description below. But thank you so much, Lisa, for this is our first podcast. Like I say, we weren't hosting the previous one, but this is our first podcast of 2022. Thank you to all the listeners for joining us again today. Make sure you do subscribe to us, whether it's on YouTube or you follow us on Facebook or wherever you listen to this podcast, if you do still listen to podcasts instead of watching us. So we really appreciate your support. We thank you so much, Lisa, for your time today. We'll be back with loads of new episodes. In fact, we're going to have to get the other side of Stockport, Cheadle, on as well. So, there's lots going on. Thank you very much for listening.